Want to know the best decks in MTG Standard Best of 3 on MTG Arena? Well, you found the right spot. We are going to be doing our weekly metagame breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. There is a ton of cool decks that we'll be featuring today. There's actually probably one of the widest pools of viable decks that we've seen in a while. Sorry for getting this out a little bit late. As I mentioned in the community post, my basement kind of flooded, my AC backed up, so was dealing with that. I didn't want an indoor swimming room, so we are still getting it out just a little bit later. And as always, we get the data from Untapped.gg, what you see on the screen, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates user win rate, gives a whole bunch of cool stats. If you want to use Untap, link is in the video description down below. As I mentioned in the best of one video, the folks at Untapped gave me a couple giveaway codes for a month worth of Untapped Premium for free. So I'm going to be randomly giving those away. So if you want to enter, comment below your favorite card from Bloomburrow. And then I will be selecting some folks from this video as well as the other. So if you want to enter, comment your favorite card from Bloomburrow. So we're going to start looking popularity of the day. We're going to look Diamond and Mythic rank of what the kind of metagame distribution is. And then we'll look at the individual deck lists. I will paste and timestamp them as well. So starting off, Golgari Midrange, 10.3% is the most popular deck. This could just be traditional midrange. This could be Vraska combo, all kind of mixed into that. Rakdos Lizards at 8.5%, almost 9%. Bats at 5%, Mono Red at both 5%. Domain kind of packages about 4%. Convoke around 3%. Boros Mice around 3%. So kind of looking at the trends, some folks have asked to see the graphs, so we'll kind of pull these up again. So we had Convoke decks very popular, kind of really fallen off. Big increase in Golgari, but even that is kind of somewhat tapering off. We do have an increase in the Rakdos Lizards in terms of like both play rate, and honestly the win rate was pretty reasonable this week as well. Bats was popular, kind of tailed off. And then right now we got some abnormalities, like Domain was showing 100%, so it kind of skews the look of the deck. I'm going to just take out Domain for a sec to get a little bit easier view. And we have like Convoke, kind of stable, the various Lizards piles, stuff like that kind of mixed in. So we will jump in. Diamond and Mythic rank from the 7th of August through to the 14th. We are at 22,000 games of Magic played. And a surprising one is the highest win rate, where I really don't agree with a lot of the cards in this deck, but it is working for someone. So we have Mono Red Aggro, 78%. For those folks who have been around the channel, you know I am a lover of Mono Red. It's the deck I play the most. It's the deck I'm going to be taking to the store championship. We spent the weekend. There's like a almost 3-hour video of us playing red-based aggro decks, just kind of playing out, configuring, stuff like that. This one seems kind of odd for a couple reasons. The biggest thing, you could probably play one too many lands, but 5 colorless lands when you have so many red pips and you want to multi-spell is a recipe for disaster. I would start off with saying that. There's Emberheart Challenger, which is just objectively a better card than Fugitive Codebreaker. It provides you the card advantage without having to take a full turn off to do it face down. This is a weaker card with the 1 toughness. It trades with creatures that have 1 power, where the Codebreaker just naturally gets bigger. I think all things considered, it is a better card. Pyrotechnic Performer is another card that you have to kind of do a lot of setup in a format where there's sweepers, there's a lot of targeted removal. You could just be dead. So that's one thing to kind of consider there. Iron Claw is fine. I still find the Red Mouse to be better. Heartfire Hero, just because it gets bigger, but I can see this being an okay card, all things considered. The cases are fine if you're doing a little bit more of a prowessy shell, but even then, you're really only playing like a few instants and sorcery, so it's a little bit hard. You want to be playing these like prowessy cards, but you're not playing that many spells. So the one thing to kind of consider there. Glittering Bolts is a very good card right now. Exiling Aklizots, the Golgari being the most popular, Preacher having 4 toughness, Archangel having 4 toughness. This is a reasonable card. Forge, I'm just mainboarding Forge. The card's very good. Koth is really solid in a lot of matchups that are grindier, like Domain. Like they're kind of limited in how they can hit it. Against Golgari, they don't have a lot of tools to do it. And I've won and through just ultimating this card quite a few times. The Elder Dragon Wars, if you're shifting up, so it looks like this version is looking to be playing more of a control game post board, and then just kind of shifting up in terms of another land, but even just going up another colorless land seems a little particular, in part because your main win condition post board is either Urbrass Forge or Koth, and Koth cares about mountains. So little thing there. If you want to see my version, just for comparisons, like we've been working a lot on this. There's a lot of close games. There's a weird I won and lost. I could have been, the way I kind of describe it, I could have been 10-0, I could have been 0-10, just the way the games kind of went that day. I won a lot of games like through top deck, and I lost a lot of games through like one life or opponent top deck. So it's one of those, I think the deck compete in a lot of angles. So Forge's main, we have the Heartfire heroes, much lower curve. Might of the Meek, we have Mirror and Bane Splitter in here as well. Just another way to kind of pump up your team. 19 mountains, 2 Fountain Port, 1 Rock-based village. Kind of mixed in. Tectonic Hazards, good against Convoke. You have your Cases side. Lynx is very good against the life gain decks. And then just pinging greedy or mana bases, just an assortment of removal as well. That's kind of a comparison of the decks. You can find this on my profile, and you can find the full video in the Store Championship testing video. Moving on, we go to Mice, 72%. So this one here, similar concept to the mono red, but you're playing the mouse synergy. We did play a game of this. It felt pretty reasonable. You get the bonus of like Manifold Mouse, which could build your own Embercleave. Raging Battle Mouse can put some counters. There's a lot more ways to trigger Valiant in this deck through incidental abilities as well, which gives you a lot of utility. The Valley Quest Caller as an anthem and kind of setting up your draws. Mabel was like whatever, and oftentimes I just didn't really want to cast this because I had so much to do with my other cards, but this does provide a powerful effect in terms of a Lord as well as a powerful equipment. Cheeky House Mouse is a way to target your things, and a 2/1 Mouse. Flowerfoot as a kind of anthem effect for your creatures. Heartfire can be pretty big in this deck. You get to take advantage of Cavernous Souls, which in the 2-color decks is really impactful. The mana is pretty bad in 2-color decks for aggro, given that you only have 8 untapped lands. You miss out on like a pathway or something like that. So that lets you not have to play the terrible Thran portal, and you get to take advantage of the villages in this deck. Acquisition Raids, very good against Artifact Enchantment Hate. Temporary Lockdown, most notable. Tech Hazard for predominantly Convoke, or just like the Bats has quite a few hits you can hit too. Torch in here, Caught in the Crossfire as another kind of way to deal with the you could choose non-outlaws or outlaws as a way to kind of sweep up one side. ETBs, you have Doorkeeper Thrall. I wouldn't even hate playing a couple more copies of this. Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, Case for Card Advantage, Clear Shot. You can Convoke and deal with some creatures there. Lauren is another Artifact Enchantment Hate. Go to Rakdos Lizards, 71%. So this deck here cares about dealing damage. So by having a damage dealt, you get to kind of activate a whole bunch of abilities. So Iridescent, Vine Slasher, and Higher Claw are 2/1 mana cards that can both trigger the 1 life loss through various ways, basically without having to formally get damage through attacks in. Fireglass Mentor is a card advantage spell. Flame Cash Geckos, Burning Tree Emissary at home, and a good late game mana filter. Gev is a way that makes your cards bigger and can ping when you cast lizards themselves. Go for the Throw, Shoot the Sheriff, Cut Down as removal. Laughing Jasper Flint as a card advantage engine. Thought Stalker Warlock as a way to kind of eat out your opponent's hand. And then Valley Flamecaller just stacks on additional damage, whether it be the pings, whether it be an attack, anything like that. Another deck that takes advantage of Cavern, Restless Fence in here, and then the villages. Hand Hate, removal, sweepers against. So this one's pretty good in this deck because your creatures just get -1/1, but against the green-white decks, they get -2/2. So it's helpful in terms of scaling there. Lily for the grindier matchups, Forge, and then same with the Sunspine. Links. Simic Cookies, 65%. So this is a tempo aggro deck looking to play around artifact synergies. So you have things like 65% in case I missed it. Spireglass Siren makes artifacts, Gingerbroot's an artifact, Teething Wormlet gets bigger, Mockingbird could copy your various creatures and give you some value there for ETBs. Agatha's Soul Cauldron basically activates all the activated abilities of the deck to any creatures while putting counters, so you can make everything unblockable with Surge Engine. Tough Cookie can animate basically everything becomes a tough cookie in the sense that it can animate non-artifact creatures. You could do the unblockable Ginger Brute type effect. Kitesail Arsonist is removal. Sentinel is another engine in terms of generating artifacts. Zoetic Glyph is a payoff for the artifacts because you can animate it into a big body. And then you have Hunter's Talon as a fight effect and a way to give trample to your creatures, as well as card advantage on the last chapter, and then Schooner as another kind of card advantage engine. Deck's playing Fountain Port and Myrex in here, and then taking advantage of all the duels. Hard-hitting questions is a fight effect. Basically, Haywire Might's like, hey, you got temporary lockdown, let me hit that. Leyline Binding. Any of the talents is super reasonable. Into the Flood Maw as a way to bounce your opponent's stuff, just kind of instant speed interaction. Artifact Enchantment or Atraxa kind of hate. Counterspell in terms of like your creature power can also be a pump effect. And Tishana's Tidebinder for activated abilities. Moving on, Rakdos Cruelclaw. So this deck here is kind of a Cascadey style deck. So the deck's built around infamous Cruelclaw. So you'll notice the curves kind of whack with this deck. But when it deals combat damage, you could you exile the cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land. You can cast a card though by discarding card rather than paying its mana ability. So you basically want to cheat into play, discard something small, get something big out. So like Virtue, Flesh Gorger, Trumpeting Carnosaur. From a curve perspective, Flesh Gorger can be cast for 3, Virtue can be cast for 2. You can channel the Trumpeting Carnosaur and then get it back with either Coiling Rebirth or Cruelty. You have Harvester of Misery as an early removal. Some of these decks have been built where you always cascade into the Cruelclaw. This one still has the Go for the Throats in here, so you can hit that technically, or Liliana, but it's just like a Rakdos mid deck with that kind of big payoff. Sideboard's just like various removal options, hand hate, and then like in the big mana kind of rampy stuff, you can go over the top with Breach the Multiverse. 5-color Domain, so 64%. So Domain, where once you ramped with a whole bunch of lands being put into play, this one's a little bit slower. It's like a mid-rangey shell. So Ancient Cornucopia helps you get ahead on lands. You are playing a number of basics, so Fabled Passage is enabled with the Surveil lands as well. You have up the Beanstalk for a card advantage engine, but you're a little bit slower. You're not going to like Atraxa as early when we had like the Dinosaur and we were playing the Battle of Zendikar. Instead, kind of more interactive, Get Lost, Lightning Helix, Temporary Lockdown in the main, Force Sunfall still with the Leyline Binding, Bird Migration, Atraxas, Jace is another kind of win condition. Just a lot of incidental life gain until you get to your big hitters, and then you just kind of take over the game. More removal in kind of mid-rangey control decks, you have access to Negates, and the Mirror, same idea. Aggressive decks, you have Lockdown, Furl Back. For the Mirror is reasonable, Graveyard Hate, stuff like that. Heavy discard decks, you have Baloth, and then this stuff for kind of the mid-rangey controlled mirrors. Go to Selesnya Rabbits, 64%. So another creature-focused synergy deck, taking advantage of Cavern. Paw Patch recruits 2 creatures in 1 thanks to the Offspring. It's a Rabbit Warrior, and then when your creatures become target, you get to distribute counters to other creatures. So a nice little effect there to punish your opponent's removal. Season War Guard attacks as a 3/2 if you have a token. Valley Mike Caller gets bigger based on whenever another rabbit comes into play, so this kind of scales in terms of the late game. Plays really nicely, like 1 drop, play another creature on 2, hop to it on 3. Very strong in that respect. Burrow Guard Mentor, power toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. Trample is really relevant, so you're seeing more copies of this than the Regal Bunnicorn. Phineas puts counters and draws you cards potentially. Case is removal. Innkeeper's Talent is another way to kind of distribute counters amongst your creatures. Get Lost is removal. The Valley Quest Caller, which we saw as another Anthem effect. Warren War Leader. So this card's pretty sweet. So it's Offspring. Now it's whenever you attack, not whenever Warren attacks. So it could just kind of stay there and you attack with other creatures. It basically has text the turn you play it, as opposed to having to wait a full turn cycle from like sorcery removal. So some utility there. Then some copies of Knight Errant of Eos on the top end. Wouldn't hate seeing even just trimming on some miscellaneous stuff and just playing the full Knight Errant. Seems reasonable. Your sideboard, Surge of Salvation for protection from black and red stuff. Calamity's Wake is Graveyard Hate. Case is removal. Get Lost is removal. Innkeeper's Talent, just and the mid-range mirrors just helping you go a little bit bigger. Invasion as a way to tax cards like Sunfall, Temporary Lockdown, or to protect against hard sweepers. Ajani, Elspeth for kind of grindier mid-range decks when they have a lot of sweepers. Opson's Bailoff for heavy discard. Orzhov discard, calling it discard. It's a Viper deck. This deck is very hard to beat from Mono Red's perspective, I will say. Viper is a hell of a card. So Viper wants you to sack stuff to get it in at a reduced cost, and then it kind of takes over the game. What you're trying to do with this deck is play cards that have effects that then stay around. Hopeless Nightmare forces a discard and then stays around. Novice Inspector's 2 permanents that can be sacked. The Bandit's Talent forces discard and then it can be sacked or use it for like the rack style ability. The Witch's Vanity's removal, plus it creates a food and it creates a wicked roll. All these things can be sacked. Tithing Blade, same idea. Removal, that can be sacked. Braids then takes advantage of this as a secondary theme to get you some value. You can rebuy all these effects with Nurturing Pixie. Legion to Ashes as a removal spell. Zorlin as another way. This is non-land permanents that it can return, so it could return all these type of removal options. Hostile Investigator is another discard enabler. Beza as kind of a catch-up mechanic. So pretty cool deck there. Hand Hate, removal, Graveyard Hate, grindy mid-range decks, control decks, Lauren for Artifact Enchantment Hate, and then Temporary Lockdown for the more aggressive decks. Moving on, Gruul Aggro, the super all-in-ish combo deck. So it's an aggro deck, but you could play it as a combo deck in a way. 58%. I don't know. This one didn't work for me as well as just traditional mono red, but like I did lose to it a couple times. It's one of those, if they have it, they have it. It either is going to look crazy good or you just answer their creatures and they're stuck with stuff. You're basically setting up like with a plotted slick shot to try to one-shot your opponent. Things like Two-Headed Hunter could give double strike, Twinferno can give double strike, and you could boost a bunch of power. Things like Demonic Ruckus can be plotted as well, so you can use your mana proactively and then set up for like a combo turn. You do only are playing like 2 protection spells main, so if they do have an interaction, it kind of gets you, but the other ways with like Heartfire Hero, give it a bunch of power. If it dies, kills your opponent that way there. Ember Heart for card advantage, Questing Druid for card advantage. Pick Your Poison, Artifact Enchantment, and Big Flyers Hate. Tech Hazard for go wide. Blooming Blast was one I saw in here. So my thing with this, I usually would want 4 damage removal or potentially 5. 2 damage doesn't do that much against some of the creatures. It doesn't hit Glissa, doesn't hit some of the other like creatures even if they've been prowessed. So you're very limited to the smaller creature mirrors, and then you just don't have really that many answers, like outside of a Witchstalker's Frenzy for some of the bigger stuff, but Witchstalker requires either some board state or your opponent to be pretty head on board. Against Golgari, it's usually only like 1 or 2 creatures maybe, and they could kind of interact with that, where Obliterating Bolt I find is a little bit better of a card. This is a more aggressive card, but it's only dealing 2 damage if they have like Preacher or something like that. Case and Forge for the grindier matchups as well. Be mindful, like I was always kind of considering this an auto include against Golgari, but depending on their configurations, like a lot of Glissa that can hit it, some are going back to Shieldred. It's sometimes hard to get this like secured and activated. Where are we? Golgari mid. So the Golgari list this week that had the higher win rate was the non-combo version. The combo is basically Innkeeper's Talent and Vraska. It's an instant win combo, but it's pretty telegraphed, and you do have to commit quite a bit of resources into the actual lesson. This version here is just playing good mid-range cards. Caustic Bronco for card advantage. You could burn them with like Flush Gorger, Aclazotz, Gix Command in the main, more discard outlets, Shieldred. Just good grindy mid-range cards kind of mixed into there. Lots of removal. Sideboard, just Hand Hate, various removal sweeper options, Sharpshooter, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Virtues for the more aggressive matchups, and some life gain. Just a lot more quality interaction cards that all have immediate impact in some capacity to the board or must be answered. Then we got 2 community decks. So we've featured this the first week from an MTGO list, but Raymond is killing it this month, 41-11 with Grixis Control. So this deck here, main board is basically, think of it blue-black Ral. So counter spells. 3 steps ahead in there. You have removal, cut down, go for the throat, long goodbye. Deduce for card advantage. Tashana's is another kind of interruption spell. Some virtues on the top end to give you life gain. Thunder Trap Trainer that we have here is going to be kind of Augur of Bolus, finds you non-creature spells. So you kind of win through Ral, you could win through Aklazot's kind of mixed into here. There's 4 Restless Reef, but you're just controlling the board a number of different ways and then trying to win through one of your various kind of control elements. Sideboard has Hand Hate. I don't think the original version had a Braid, but with so many Forge decks going around, having access to a Braid is very flexible. Various counter spells, removal options, Chrome Host as you're showing as a control deck. They're going to take out removal. You bring in Chrome Host Sea Shark as kind of a next level. Outrageous Robbery for the big mana deck, stuff like that. You can kind of get a whole bunch of value from them that way there. And then lastly, red-white Boros token control. We featured this in Best of 1. It was killing it. I got like 7 wins in the standard challenge with it. There's a couple different variations. Deck's very strong. We're seeing it show up in MTGO leagues, and then we're also seeing it now in Best of 3. So the core of the deck, take a look at the curve. Just a little easier to highlight here. So it's built around the card Caretaker's Talent. So you read this card initially, you think it's for a tokens deck. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield, you draw a card once per turn. You get to create a copy of a token, and then your tokens become, you get +2/2, kind of like a mana investing wedding announcement. But this deck works very well when you can play it with stuff like Urbrass Forge, where you can just have it's basically a free card draw every turn. So you get that engine going. And then you also, with Fountain Port, basically you get the token and then you can sack the token and draw a card. So it's kind of a huge engine in terms of value. You grind your opponent out that way there. You're playing a bunch of removal like Torch Tower, Helix, Get Lost, some lockdowns main. You have Sunfall as a full set. So you're kind of playing up that angle. Carrot Cake can draw you a card. So creates a rabbit, helps set up your draw. If you have Caretaker out, it draws you a card. But then for instant speed, you gain 3 life and create another token. And then that creates, because this is each turn. So you could draw basically 2 cards per turn cycle. Same with the Virtue of Loyalty. You can flash it in, and then you get to draw a card on an opponent's turn. Archangel Elspeth is another token enabler, life gainer, and it could return non-land permanents. So it can rebuy any destroyed or countered Caretaker's Talents or Urbrass Forges. Utility lands, Demolition Fields, Myrex, Fountain Port. Sunken Citadel is very strong in this deck. You have a lot of lands with activated abilities, so it gives you a cost reduction there. And sideboard, Braids, Artifact and Creature Removal, Destroy Evil, Enchantment, Big Things Removal, Graveyard Hate, Sweepers, some more, Lauren, Artifact, Enchantment Hate, Beza for the kind of grindier matchups. In Best of 1, I was playing 2 Beza's main, but the meta is a lot more aggressive in Best of 1. This is a way to kind of gain you some life, give you some blockers. Sarah Paragon for the grindier matchups. Elish Norn for anything with ETBs, domains, stuff like that to kind of slow them down. So that is it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been enjoying, and make sure to comment your favorite Bloomburrow card to get included in the draw for Untapped premium giveaway. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.